Loomis is attempting, if you didn't see what he was attempting to do, he's trying to lure me back into a question I said I wasn't going to address. And he knows I have to. So I will have to talk about the founders. He knows throwing red meat out to me. But let me first deal with what Professor Loomis throws out at the end. Disenfranchised. There is no one disenfranchised by the Electoral College, any more than anyone is disenfranchised when you lose an election. Every one of you in Michigan, do you have the right to vote for president? No, you don't have the right to vote for president. Stop that. You don't. Do you vote for president? And does your vote count in Michigan? Yes. The answer is yes. Does that mean you're disenfranchised? Under no circumstances that I can see could you call that being disenfranchised. No one is disenfranchised. Everybody's vote counts, and it counts as in your state. We have 51 democratically run elections that up to the president to choosing the president. No one is disenfranchised in this. I will take, however, Professor Loomis's yes and sure on this argument and declare victory. That it has had some good, and then he said a but at the end. So he had yes, it became yes, sure, but. So I'll take the yes. We'll start there. Let's go back to the founders, though, for a moment. He mentions Robert Dahl. Robert Dahl is a very, very famous political theorist. He is the man that got me going in studying the Electoral College because I found him profoundly wrong. And I read it in graduate school, theory of democratic, I blocked that out of my mind. You have to.
Never had it.
Robert Dahl's very famous book, in which he argues things like the men at the founding were baffled and confused on this. And it was jerry-rigged. It was thrown together at the last minute. So what I did, it didn't seem right to me. It just didn't seem like that would be right. And so what I did was I actually, unlike most political scientists on this question, actually sat down and read the debates at the Constitutional Convention. And what I discovered, and I've written about it, what I've discovered is that there's a real coherent series of arguments and debates and thoughts leading to what we have at the end. It is thrown together at the end because through most of the convention, the actual founders had legislative election, that the president would be chosen by Congress, but in a very specific context. And that context was wherever they voted for legislative election selection for the president, it was for one term and for 7 years, which would give the president independence. They couldn't run again. They couldn't hold it over their head. It was a long term. When they decided to change that, that context had to change. And what Dahl and others read it as is it's just jerry-rigged thrown together at the end. It's not. The context of the other votes change, so their theory changes, has to change to go with it. The theory doesn't change what they have to do. What the founders wanted was a president would be independent of Congress, also independent of, frankly, this is unpopular to say today, independent of the whims of popular opinion. And they also wanted a president that would have the character necessary for the office, what I call virtue. And they decided that this sort of a deliberative process that would unfold as the Electoral College should be it. Now, make no mistakes, however, that is not how our system works. And that is an irrelevant argument in discussing the Electoral College and whether we should do with it now. We have to look at, has it functioned in a good way in American history or not? Can we come up with a system that we can say would be better or not? The foundations of it are really irrelevant. It is a democratic system now. And until the states decide they don't want a democratic system with it, it will be such.
Thank you, Dr. Gregg. Dr. Loomis, the next 5 minutes are yours.
We seem to be agreeing with each other in perverse ways. I just can't. I was going to start with somewhere else, but it's a democratic system. It is, but it isn't. If it were a democratic system, there would be one person, one vote. and every vote would count the same. And we're going to talk about that in the argument for abolition. But I would agree that it's become this democratic system, and that it ought to be fully democratic, not this charade of 50 separate contests, assuming that ends up with a small d democratic result. First of all, though, I want to go back to a terminology that is often used with the Electoral College, and I'm kind of a student of language, and I kept running into two terms, actually three terms. One was jerry-rigged, Jerr-rigged, jerry-built. The second term was jury-rigged, Jury, rigged. And the third term was a combination of the two, Jerry, Jerry-rigged. Well, that term does not exist. It's either jerry-built or jury-rigged. Now, jerry-built means that it was built of inferior materials and more or less designed to fail. That's not the case of the Electoral College. I don't think they designed it to fail. I think they had limited foresight, but certainly it was not built of inadequate materials. But jerry-built is a kind of a negative term. On the other hand, jury-rigged is a naval term that talks about adaptation and ingenuity in solving a problem. And in that sense, I'm a fan of the Electoral College. I think it was jury-rigged. I think they talked about it. They didn't talk about it as long as they might have, but I'm not sure they could, because they didn't really know what they were getting into, as was pretty obvious. But it's ingenious. And to an extent, with a few exceptions, 1824, arguably 2000, 1960 maybe, 1876, so that's more complex. It has worked, but it's been jury-rigged. It's sailing on a kind of half-constructed mast. So I think that it is ingenious and it's powerful. Secondly, I really do think we got to go back. When we look at the framers, they thought they were creating a process in which there would be real deliberation after the vote. That the most eminent men would come together and deliberate on who among them would be the most qualified candidate. That just didn't work. That was never the case. Political parties, it turns out, and they couldn't have known this because we were the first modern democracy. Political parties are going to organize democracies, come hell or high water, and they did in the United States. They have around the world. But they did assume that there was going to be this deliberation, and they were also, I think it's crucial to think, they were creating this office of the presidency, and it wasn't the presidency of 13 states or 30 or 40 states. It was the presidency of the people. In the end, the legitimacy comes from the people. That's the power of this national office, and it is a national office where everybody comes together and votes for that individual. So it is a democratic system. It started out as one thing, emphasizing deliberation, was altered by the party system, and the question is, although we have certainly at least muddled through with it, is it in the 21st century a institution that can sustain the scrutiny of really being a powerful, small d democratic institution?